Welcome to the second episode of the Roar Rundown Sports Podcast, a weekly sports podcast talking about anything and everything related to Ouachita Baptist Tiger Athletics. I'm Chris Gay, and I'm thrilled that you are joining us, and I'm so excited for this athletic season for the Tigers. A big thank you to the Ouachita Baptist Band for providing that great music intro for us. And for those that are not familiar, Ouachita Baptist University is a private Division II school in Arkadelphia, Arkansas that competes in the Great American Conference. In Ouachita's sports media department, it is the students that run the show, and this podcast is 100% student run, and we hope that you will be able to follow us along this journey to cover Ouachita and other exciting events in the GAC. For those that tuned in to the first ever episode last week, it was just me talking, no video, but now I'm joined by Zach Cloud and Weston Bailey. Just introduce yourselves.
Yeah, I'm Zach Cloud. I'm a junior here at Ouachita, and I'm a finance major. So,
yeah, I am Weston Bailey. I am a sophomore here at Ouachita. I am a pitcher on the baseball team, and communications and media is what I'm studying.
So, obviously, great cast here that we have, and I'm a senior, by the way, a senior communications major. So we'll go ahead and open it up to the previous week's recap. For those that are familiar, Ouachita had a big season opening win against the Southwestern Oklahoma State Bulldogs in Weatherford, Oklahoma, winning 38-14. And that was just a great opening win. What were some of the big takeaways from that game?
For me, I think the biggest takeaway was the passing attack. Ouachita is mainly focused and ran around a rushing offense, and last week, starting quarterback Riley Harris actually led the team in rushing, but also threw for nearly 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if this passing attack stays consistent and hopefully gives defenses a lot of trouble throughout the entire year.
Yeah, I really liked that. I also liked how we showed different packages in our first game of the season. We had some plays with Kendall Givens taking snaps and Eli Livingston taking snaps, so we kind of showed it doesn't have to be just Riley taking the snaps at quarterback, and we can be lethal in different areas. So
absolutely.
Yeah, one thing I will point out, the rushing attack, though we had, Kendall Givens definitely going to be the number one ball carrier for the Tigers after T.J. Cole leaving last season, and Chris Henley Jr. and Isaac Edwards are probably going to split some time as the number 2 with Riley Harms and also quarterback Eli Livingston. They're excellent running quarterbacks. But I will add, we only have 2 returning starters on the offensive line last season, Nathan Turner and Zachary Henson, both outstanding players. Henson, one of the top 100 players in Division II. But keep in mind, for a team that's so successful in the rushing attack, only 2 yards a carry for Kendall Givens and 3 yards a carry for both Edwards and Henley. That's not something we're not used to see as Tiger fans. Yeah. But it's because that's a pretty young and slightly inexperienced offensive line. But we also, like you guys said, lots of different packages. Harms, I don't know if he's ever thrown 4 touchdowns in his college career yet. But, this is certainly a great game. And it was a great time to see Connor Flanagan. And again, we have a lot of new guys in that receiving corps too. Kemontre McKnight, he's not exactly a new guy, but he didn't play. I don't think he played at all last season due to injury. And Jeremiah Turner spent most of the season on special teams. Bo Baker and Chris Hightower really was not super involved last season. But these are a lot of new names that we're going to see quite often throughout the year. And frankly, I'm pretty excited for it. It's going to be an adjustment, but I think Coach Knight's got his teams in good hands.
Oh, yeah. Talking about those new faces you mentioned, Jeremiah Turner, he had a really impressive 25-yard touchdown off of a fake screen. That was our that was our second score of the game to go up 14-0. And just kind of throughout the game, we showed we're willing to throw it to Flanagan deep. And even if it doesn't show up on the box score off of his completions, there was still multiple times where we target him and they get a pass interference call. So it still advanced the ball for us down the field, it's just kind of nice to have that if, like our run game showed, was starting to struggle a little bit during that game.
Absolutely. And talking about the O-line a little bit, it can be concerning that almost the entire offensive line from last year is no longer here. However, the guys on the field now are obviously extremely talented. And it was week 1. I think Riley was only sacked twice, which is not a big deal, especially for how mobile he can be. So I think it'll just take, a week or two for this offensive line to really mesh together. And once they do, I think it's going to be trouble for opposing defenses.
Yeah, definitely. And so far what we've seen is there is good pass protection because Harms almost had 300 passing yards in just 18 attempts, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and yes, just sacked twice. And Flanagan over 100 yards receiving. And, but I'll go back on some inexperience and some new guys on this team. Jeremiah Turner, if I'm correct, this was like the first time he's ever had a catch in a game. If not, it's certainly the first time he's had a touchdown. And he's going to be playing probably more tight end than receiver this year, especially after Hunter Swoboda leaving and having a couple pro opportunities. I will point out, not too many new faces on the defense, but there are some big guys that are going to impact the team a lot in this game. Josiah Johnson, great safety, had 10 total tackles. Jax Miller had 8 tackles, a sack, 1.5 tackles for loss. And then we did have some guys in the secondary leave last season. Andrew Hayes transferred to Central Arkansas. So Mario Ganter Jr. is one of those guys that I look at that's going to have a very impressive season. He really showed out last year as a young player, but he's got a whole season under his belt, and he's going to starting corner now. It's going to be interesting. What do you guys see when you look at that defense? Still have some guys returning, but some new guys that are getting bigger opportunities this year. What do you see when you look at that defense for the Tigers?
I really like one of our big returners, Mikey Gonzalez. He's a big body for us at linebacker, and he'll play off the end for us. Guys like that, he shows up on the box score. He's got 2 tackles, but it's all tackles for loss. So it's, he's a big difference maker for us, a veteran that played a lot for us last year. Like you said, also, I have very high expectations for Josiah Johnson. I think he's going to be really good for us. He's going to fly around. He's going to be able to get after the ball and play a lot for us too. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that, first of all, our secondary this year is going to be extremely successful. But like you said, we are a young secondary for the most part. And the best way to cushion a young secondary is by a strong box in front 8, front 7. And, Ouachita was able to do exactly that last week with a total of 5 sacks. And I think throughout the season, if the big boys up front can continue to help the guys, in the secondary, I think it'll be a smooth transition, especially for guys like Mario, like you mentioned, and the rest of the boys.
And if you just look at what the defense did to Southwestern Oklahoma State last week, Scott Pfeiffer coming in first season as starting quarterback for the Bulldogs. He was a D1 quarterback last year and he got sacked 5 times, was 11 of 21, no touchdowns, 131 yards. And I know that's, Russell McCoy is brand new head coach there, brand new players across the board for him. And then you look at the rushing attack. Outside of Haichi, Troy Henderson, even Scott Pfeiffer, they couldn't do anything. So they really shut down the run game. And, of course, the receiving game. Even though, yes, we did say it's a young secondary, one of their better players from a year ago, Jacob Karsak, he was actually their only 100-plus yard receiver returning this year, held to 14 yards. Wow. That's excellent, and one of the better tight ends in the conference. So just really love what we got to see from them. So I'll go ahead and transition into some of the other scores that we got to see from this previous weekend. So men's soccer opened their season in Nashville, Tennessee, Jackson, Tennessee, against the Union University Bulldogs. They lost 0-3. But when you look at the stat comparisons between the two teams, OBU's had some issues, or just some struggles in the past with offense. 8 shots for OBU is not a horrible number that what we've seen in the past, but compared to 22 shots by Union, that's a pretty big deficit. But of course, they make up. OBU makes up in that they have a good defense around the goal. Even though they did allow 3 goals, they still had 5 saves. And fouls were also an issue last year, and 7 fouls is actually, a pretty good number. So, and at the same time, or actually, their next game was against Christian Brothers in Memphis, and of course they did lose 0-1 there. That was a close game, and I will say, though the fouls were an issue, Ouachita's defense was excellent. 26 shots were attempted by Christian Brothers, and they got 1 in. I mean that's excellent defense. Ouachita, their offense is still struggling. That's something that they can improve upon. But don't you agree with me? Is that the defense, at least in this game, looked pretty solid?
Oh yeah. That's one of the great things about playing a two-way sport that's got defense and offense. If you've got a great defense, even if your offense is struggling, you're going to be able to stay in games, as we showed against Christian Brothers. You shoot 26 shots on the goal and only 1 goes in, you're going to be in the game no matter what. So
that's a great ratio, and props to our defense for trying to pick up our offense on that end. But the main thing that sticks out to me is that we only had 2 shots on goals, and I think that'll continue to improve throughout the season. But when you look at 26 shots compared to only 2, I think it's really just time of offensive possession that can wear down a defense. So I think a more balanced attack from the soccer squad, I think they'll really be able to improve things and get things going.
Now, on the flip side, the women's soccer squad, they had a win, but they also their season opener ended in a tie against the Riverhawks of Northeastern State. It was at their house, and when you look at the comparisons, they're pretty similar. They're not as different as the men's squad. Northeastern State shot 11 times, OBU 8. OBU did have 9 fouls, which was kind of an issue. But, of course, and then Jamie Fowler, who's been excellent this year, is actually second in the conference so far in goals with 3 in just 2 games. She had the one goal off a penalty kick, and then Haley Garcia had the 1 goal for the Riverhawks. So that was definitely a game that, it is a tie, but, I know to them, if it's not a win, it's not good enough. So, and then they did win their home opener, Ouachita did, against Southwest Baptist 3-0. That was a very big win. They were like, we have a lot of things we can improve upon going into our opener, into our home opener. So their offense was rather aggressive, 18 shots to only 10 for Southwest Baptist. So their defense was excellent. And one thing I will point out, something that they're going to eventually have to work on, is the fouling. 9 fouls again this game. OBU, our soccer squad, very aggressive, but sometimes it can be a little bit too aggressive. And once it comes, conference time, that might end up biting them.
Absolutely, and I think it's all mental when it comes to fouls. It is extremely early in the season, and we did mention that they struggled with that last year. But I think throughout the season, that can be reined in, and I think it's a very encouraging stat that we had 18 shots on goal, and even though only 3 were in, that's a great offensive possession to have 18 shots on goal. And so I think with a continued powerhouse offense like that, we should see some high-scoring games from this squad.
Oh, yeah. And also, like we said, we just now started. We're only a couple games into the season or so. So all our girls, our guys on the soccer team too, they're kind of getting their first game jitters out. They've been waiting for a long time to play. So you kind of expect to see some things a little bit rough around the edges, but that's what week 1's for, to clean up a little bit of your issues. So
absolutely,
we'll be able to be just fine.
Well, now outside of soccer, the women's and men's cross country, they had their first event of the season last weekend. Talking about the women's, They placed 6th out of 21 teams at the Memphis Twilight Tournament, which was at Christian Brothers University in Memphis. They finished second among Division II teams, and it's always great for Tiger fans to be able to say they finished above Harding, but they also finished above some D1 schools. And Taylor Keith, she was the top runner for Ouachita a year ago. She finished in 8th place in the 5K. And then Lucy Holden also finished in that race 27th. And, of course, that may be a big number, but there are a lot of runners in this competition. But going into the men's, they had a pretty similar amount of success. They placed 6th out of 20 teams at the tournament. And they also did finish above Harding, another jab into the Bisons. But they also finished above Ole Miss, Arkansas State, and North Alabama. All three are Division I universities. Of course, Ole Miss is SEC. It's a
big deal.
It is a big deal for Ouachita, a Division II team, and not even like the biggest conference in Division II either, against an SEC team in Ole Miss. Whether or not SEC cross country is, big time compared to some of the other conferences, that's still pretty big. So, and then Dylan Drew ran the 4-mile race and finished 25th, and Cade Swindle participated in that same competition, finished 27th. So I will go ahead and transition to women's tennis. They had their season opener this weekend, and they had a pretty good performance in last year's Rumble by the River, but they had an even better performance so far with 10 wins in singles and doubles. So, of course, women's tennis was pretty solid last year, but this was definitely a tournament to really give them some confidence really early into the season.
Absolutely. And, one of the perks of being on the baseball team is our field is right next to the tennis courts. And watching those guys and girls practice and hearing those guys and girls practice, they absolutely get after it each and every single day. And Ouachita's tennis coach, I believe, has been here for an extremely long time and is extremely well respected around campus. And I think really does a great job of preparing these athletes for a season.
Oh, yeah. It's really great to have that culture established of, veteran coaches. Everybody knows what to expect out of a team with coaches like that. So we always, open up the season, we always have high expectations for our players. So it's good to see good production.
Well, in the Rumble by the River competition, Austin Crocker, who was perhaps the best player on the team a year ago, she finished 6-0 in the first position. Calderova was in the third position. Of course, this is in singles against the Riverhawks, and then in singles against Dallas Baptist, Calderova won in third position. Another player finished in fifth, Olivia Gaston in seventh, and Marley Bledsoe in 10th. So pretty good performance by them. Of course, they had a good performance against Northeastern State in doubles, as Crocker and Calderova both won in first position, and OBU also had some wins against Emporia State in the second position. And speaking of Calderova, she is 3-0 to start her Tiger career for women's tennis, so congratulations, and it's only up from here on out. Now, one of the bigger, outside of football, one of the bigger events this weekend was Ouachita volleyball. They played in the A&M Kingsville Invitational in Kingsville, Texas, and they did go 1-3. This is a team that's got a lot of high expectations, especially for a much improved season last year, going 19-12 overall. But I'm not saying that this is really indicative of what we're going to see throughout the year, but 1-3 in the tournament, losing to Kingsville in 3 sets, New Mexico Highlands in 4, Tiffin in 3. Not exactly what we wanted to see, and I know that's not what they expected to see either, but they did finish off on a high note, beating Colorado State Pueblo in 5 sets. I know there was a long weekend. All 4 games were back-to-back. So when you look at that invitational, you got to take away some positives. So, what things did you see from the Tiger squad that you thought were, you could take away on a high note?
Yeah. Like you said, it was really good to see. We were able to close out the weekend with the win, have a good positive to see from there. And we got a good little preview at kind of who our top girls might be. Emily Adams and Riley Brazil both had 10 kills each. That's nothing short of impressive. Erin Dawson was right there with 8. Leah Gardner had 6. So, we showed who our top girls are probably going to be, flying around and making good plays for us.
I think in any sport, and volleyball is no exception, when you have a rough start, you turn to leadership. And I think with some of our younger studs, like, for example, Riley Brazil, I think you really turn to someone like that and ask even more of them to step up on the mental and leadership side, because you will rally around your team's best player or one of your best players. So you definitely want to turn to leadership there and ask her to really get the team rolling.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Emily Adams and Riley Brazil were both a part of the loaded 2022 volleyball class for the Tigers. That class essentially, and Coach Frizz, in my conversation last week with her, she pretty much did contribute them to the amount of success they did have. They were 9-20 in 2021, and then improved to 19-12 in 2022. That's big. They didn't have a lot of team turnover necessarily, except with this class. Now, it is good to see Erin Dawson was also a part of that 2022 class. She didn't play a lot as a true freshman, but she has already come in, and she did have 8 kills in that one game against Colorado State Pueblo. And it's good to see from her. Leah Gardner had 6, as you mentioned. She's a true freshman. Coming in, starting at middle blocker, that was something that Coach Frizz said, they like the youth. They always have. They've found a lot of success with it in the past. And Leah Gardner's trying to show that this 2023 class is just as special as last year's. To finish out in that game, Courtney Hansen had 37 assists. Kellen Church and Riley Brazil both had 3 service aces. Avery Giles had 20 digs. Riley Brazil had 18 digs. Courtney Hansen had 14. Now, what I will mention about the dig numbers, last year's dig leader and actually second in the conference in digs was Alexi Castello. And, of course, this is going to be the first year in like 4 years that they haven't had her on the roster. One of the best defensive players in the conference. And Coach Frizz talked about it was very difficult to try to find not necessarily a replacement, but someone to step in and sort of take over. And what we're seeing is sort of a rotation of different players, as in Giles, Brazil, and Hansen all had pretty similar dig numbers. So still, I don't think we're really set on who's going to take over in her spot as libero, but it should be pretty interesting. Of course, it is just 4 games into the season. So after the 4 games have ended, both Brazil and Adams led the team with 29 kills. Gardner had 28, and that's excellent for a true freshman. Dawson was 4th with 20. Courtney Hansen led the team in assists with 116. No one even came close. Kellen Church and Avery Giles, of course, had 7. Brazil leads the team in service aces with 8. Emily Adams and Leah Gardner both lead the team in blocks with 8. Erin Dawson has 7 right behind them. Riley Brazil leads the team in digs with 42. And again, the dig numbers for the top 4 players on the team pretty close. Hansen with 38, Giles with 36, and Kellen Church with 30. So you look at the total record of the teams that played over the weekend. Football 1-0, men's soccer 0-2, women's soccer 1 win, 1 tie, no losses, and volleyball 1-3. And you can't really judge cross country or tennis simply off of records right now. So it'll be interesting to see what everybody will be able to do coming into week 2 of their season. And speaking of which, we're going to start off right away with the Tiger Prowl preview. And to start it off, Ouachita is hosting the Rangers of Northwestern Oklahoma State this Saturday at 6 p.m. for their first home game of the season. So, big game. Northwestern Oklahoma State struggled a lot last season, only winning one game and losing their season opener this season. But outside of that, what are we expecting from, and we'll start, what are we expecting from this Ranger squad and what they're going to possibly be able to do at Cliff Harris Stadium?
Honestly, I'm not. Last year when we played them, we got them 48-7. We've got a pretty similar squad compared to theirs, so I'm not expecting too much. I'm expecting about the same as how we were able to do last week against SWOSU. But yeah, I really expect for Ouachita. I expect our quarterback Riley. I expect him to be able to air the ball out. We showed we were willing to do that last week. I don't think much of that's really going to be able to change, but I really hope our run game will be able to improve. We'll be able to get those 2 yards per carry, 3 yards per carry, up to 6 yards per carry or 5 yards per carry. And I really think we'll be able to be more productive that way.
Well, I really think that if the Rangers want to have a chance in this game, that they have to play a clean ball game. Last year they had 10 penalties and 2 fumbles. And so, especially with a defense like ours, ball security and not killing drives is going to be massive for this Rangers offense. And when you look at the OBU side, I think establishing the run game a little bit better. I know it sounds crazy because that's all we've done in the past, decade or more. But Riley Harms obviously has the ability to air the ball out when he wants to. And so I'd really love to see Kendall Givens and the rest of the running backs really get after it and, like you said, really attack the ground game.
Yeah, if you look at the rushing stats in last year's game, TJ Cole, now no longer on the team, had 113 yards off of just 15 carries. Kendall Givens had 94 yards on just 13. Both of those, that's 7 yards a carry. And so what they probably know already, and Isaac Edwards also had 54 yards on the ground and a touchdown. What Ouachita is probably going to go ahead and say, all right, we can run the ball against this Ranger team. We did last season, and this is a great opportunity for that young offensive line to get more reps in and to be able to create. They've shown that they can protect the quarterback. They just have to show that they can open up holes big enough for guys like Givens, guys like Henley and Edwards to make those home run type of runs that we are so used to seeing. And we know, our receivers are going to be there. Connor Flanagan didn't have a huge game against them last year. He did have the lone receiving touchdown. But, like you said, the passing, it's going to be there. The catching's going to be there. But the run game has to get established early, I think. Early as possible. Like first game, first play of the game, it's got to get established.
Absolutely. And another thing I want to talk about with this offensive line, after watching some film from last weekend's game, another reason I'm not necessarily so alarmed is because the Ouachita offensive line last week was facing 7 to 8 defenders in the box almost every down. It was obvious that defense was expecting run, and run. So, when you have 5 guys up front trying to block 7 or 8 in the run game, your yards per carry is not necessarily supposed to be as good. And so if I'm the Rangers defense, I'm most importantly going to try to stop the run first, but it's going to be important for them to be able to make adjustments if they want to have a chance, because if they do load the box just like SWOSU did, they're going to be in trouble because Riley's going to air it out, and I expect a big game from Flanagan.
Oh, yeah. It'll be another 4 or 5 touchdown game for Riley if Northwestern Oklahoma State's not able to focus on our receivers. So they're going to have to be able to step up and do a good job of trying to stop both, which I know is a tough challenge for them. So,
well, that makes it a headache for the Rangers, because the Bulldogs showed that, okay, we pressure the run game, pressure the quarterback. Well, guess what? He's still going to have a completion and a touchdown. He had 4 of them, and yes, they did kind of stop the run game. They used the inexperience of the offensive line to their advantage. They couldn't stop the passing game. And then, of course, Ouachita's defense stepped up as well. But the Rangers last year, they couldn't necessarily stop the run game. And so now they have to worry about this passing attack that they haven't seen from the Tigers in the past as much. Riley, for those that are not familiar, Riley Harms has not always been the most utilized passer. But so far, this is probably – some teams are probably alarmed, honestly, because they know the run game is excellent, but now they have to consider the fact that the Tigers are showing what they can do in the passing attack, even with like a plethora of new receivers, and they're already looking pretty solid. So it's got to be, a little bit, full of anxiety, if you will, for the Rangers, thinking about, okay, if we stop the run, then that means the passing attack is going to be great. But if we, have everybody back and stop in the passing attack, well, they're going to get a first down every play just off of handing it off to Kendall Givens. So it'll be really interesting. And what I will notice is that the defense for Ouachita last year was excellent against the Rangers, only allowing 148 passing yards. But one guy that is returning, not quarterback-wise, but running back-wise, is Darian Gill. Last year was underutilized, had only 11 rushes for 94 yards and a touchdown, the lone touchdown of that game, I might add. He's back this year, and in their opener against Arkansas Monticello, he had just 18 attempts for 116 yards, 6.4 yards per carry. There wasn't another running back on that team that was as successful. And then their passing attack, Caleb Neal didn't even break 100 passing yards. He had a touchdown, but he was 9 of 22, also had an interception. It's pretty clear, if I'm the coach of the Rangers, you feed that ball to Gill, because he's already shown that he's going to break through, he's going to get a bunch of yards, and in so few carries, you have to feed him. They, just like what we said about the Tigers, they have to establish a run game. Well, so do the Rangers. That's going to be, to me, that's their key to success. Run.
Absolutely. And I think when you look on the flip side of that and you're looking at Ouachita's defense, I think that if I'm Ouachita, I am loading the box almost every down. And I think this is going to be a great opportunity, like we talked about earlier, is that how young our secondary is. This is going to be a great opportunity for us to test out our secondary, because with a loaded box anticipating the run, there's going to be a lot of one-on-ones on the outside and not a lot of help over top. So these young DBs are going to get a really good chance to show what they can do without any help.
Oh yeah, yeah. We've definitely got to make their quarterback make plays, because, like Chris said earlier, we know their running back's going to be able to make plays. So if we load the box and we're able to limit him, they're going to have to be able to get going somewhere, which will have to be in the pass game. So I'm really excited to see our DBs, really excited to see what they have to offer, see how well we're able to compete.
Well, and in preparation of this Saturday's game, the football team did let our media crew come in and do a couple of interviews in the locker room. And actually, Weston, you had a chance to sit down with Riley Harms, the quarterback for Ouachita, and you had a chance to talk with him. How did that go?
It went awesome, actually, and it was my first ever interview, and I couldn't have asked for someone better to interview. Riley, for those who don't know, is not only an exceptional football player, but an exceptional human, and he just lights up an entire room when he comes in. He's always got a smile on his face. He is exactly what you look for in a leader for a football team, and I am so excited for him, because he's I want to say a 6-year guy, but this is only his second full season for the Tigers. And I think that this year for him is going to be huge with his conformality in this offense. And I don't want to spoil too much, but he will go into depth about ways that he's going to prepare for this season and his hopes for it. And so I think Riley's in for a huge season, and I'm excited for you guys to get to listen to my sit-down conversation with him. And
we'll be very interested in hearing that interview. Not only that, but we'll also have a few clips of Dante Gibson, defensive back for Ouachita, some of his interview as well, right? And when we do return, we will, after those interviews, we will go ahead and preview the rest of the sports that are going to be playing this weekend, starting off with women's soccer.
Riley, before we get into talking about football, I want to talk a little bit about your plans for the future. Not very many people may know this, but you actually received a diploma last May, and now you're in a grad program. So talk to me a little bit about what your plans are for after your time at Ouachita.
Right. Well, thanks to COVID and some injuries, I actually have 2 years left, so I'll finish this year, and I'll come back and play next fall as well. And then after that, I plan to pursue college coaching in really any way I can, whether that's volunteering somewhere or starting somewhere as a graduate assistant. I'm pretty fortunate to have the coaches I have here. They have a lot of connections. They've been around for a long time. So Coach Knight, Coach Derby, and Coach Shock are going to be able to set me up and start me off well.
I could definitely see that for you being a college coach. And for your path, wanting to go into coaching, obviously you have to be big on leadership and mentality. So talk to me a little bit about how, you find your way with this team and being a leader throughout the program.
Yeah, so this is my 6th year, and that helps a lot with being a leader because experience is probably the best way to lead. You know what to expect, and you know how guys are going to react in certain situations, but you also know, how to react to situations yourself. When you're a freshman or a sophomore in college, you just haven't seen very much. You think you know everything, right? But you don't. And that's the same thing with players and coaches too. As a player, even when you're older, you think but coaches always do the best. So it's fun to be around those guys and lead by example, but also lead vocally. And the best way to do that is just get to know everybody. And when you're a 6-year guy, it can be hard to know when you're 23 to get to know an 18-year-old, but you just spend time with them and not necessarily worrying about football all the time too. You can get to know them as a person, what they like in school, what they do outside of football, and then you let football become secondary after that. And that just helps, form relationships, but it also helps you on the field because you start to gain chemistry as well.
It's not too often that you can be so excited about a vet returning to the game. Talk to me a little bit how excited you are for this year compared to the start of last year and how the conformality of the first season opener game was this year compared to last year.
The biggest difference between this year and last year is just my comfort because I was able to practice a bunch with the team leading up to last year, but I had no game experience. And that showed. Obviously, I struggled in the opener last year. And then as the season went on, got a little more comfortable. But this year, I was in the season the whole in the offense the whole off season, and got to spend a lot of time with the receivers, running backs, offensive line, and just work through a lot of the kinks and stuff that you get. Whereas when it's your first start, you kind of just react. And so this year, I knew a lot, to expect, and I was a lot more comfortable. And as far as just playing, it's the same with leadership. Experience is huge. You see things once or twice on the field and they stick with you a lot more than if it's the first time you're kind of guessing.
So it's no secret that especially over the last decade, Ouachita has been a super run-heavy first offense. But if you look back to last week, you had nearly 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, with most importantly, no interceptions. So talk to me a little bit how the pass game is going to impact this year, maybe compared to a few years back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the big thing the last couple of years is the continuity on the offensive line has been pretty amazing. It was almost the same starting 5 3 years in a row, that's pretty rare. So this year, we had to replace 2.5 guys on the offensive line, and so that's a huge part of it is just the meshing. I would say even more than quarterbacks and receivers and running backs, the offensive line working together and meshing is more important than any other position. Because there's so much communication that has to happen, and there's 5 guys working together, whereas a quarterback and receiver is just 1 guy, and there's a lot more variables. So that would be why I think we started off a little bit more pass heavy last week, and we will continue to throw the ball, but we're going to evolve as the season goes on and just adapt to what is working. And last year, like you hinted at, we ran to throw the ball, and this year we're probably going to throw to run the ball. Get ourselves some lighter boxes if we throw the ball a little more, and then make it easier on Kendall, Isaac, and Chris, and keep that offensive line moving, and they're going to keep getting better too.
There's hype around this team every year, but it seems that coming into this year, there's a little more than usual. A lot of guys around campus are excited about what this season could hold for you guys. Talk to me a little bit about your goals for the season and what your big plans are for this team.
Yeah, I think around the program, we're a little bit frustrated with how last season ended. We didn't play our best game in the playoff game, and we got beat badly because of it. I think that's been a huge part of our motivation because we've been in the playoffs before, and we think we could do a lot more than just reach the playoffs. So we had a really good and motivated offseason, which is hard to do coming off of a conference championship season. You can kind of get complacent, but Coach Knight is never going to let us do that. But the players on this team also had the urgency to attack it. I think that's where the the excitement comes from because a lot of the people on this team really love football. It's fun to have talent, but if you have guys that love football, that's what makes it fun. To go out there and work every day. And as far as goals, it's hard to pinpoint exactly goals. I mean, I think for this team, we're just going to take it one game at a time. I know that's cliche, but really we want to take it one game at a time. We want to win the game that's in front of us. And you can't win the conference championship without winning the next game, right? So you don't want to sit there and say we're going to go 11-0 and then just think about the playoffs. We got to win against Northwest Oklahoma this week, and then once we get to Monday next week, we'll worry about that.
Coach Knight is a legendary coach and known statewide. How important is that relationship that you have with him?
You hit the nail on the head. He's legendary, and I would say he's even known nationwide. I think it's huge, and like I said earlier, with him being my head coach and me wanting to be a college coach in the future, him being the former president of the AFCA is going to be awesome. But as far as our relationship goes, I mean, I go to him for any kind of wisdom that I need, because he's experienced a lot. He's been on both ends of the spectrum. When he first got here, this program was not doing very well, but he's turned it around, so he understands what it takes. And so that's a relationship I would like to hold for a long time, not just something that I have while I'm here for my years playing.
Absolutely. Riley, thank you so much for your time, and good luck this weekend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Let's go back to last year, conference championship. What did that season look like for you, and what did that win mean for this team?
Winning the conference championship last year was big after having that down year in 21. And I say it was a down year. I mean, we won 9 games that year. So I mean, it just wasn't the standard. So going into the season last year, we knew that we had to get that top spot back from our opposing opponents in the conference or whatnot. And I think we did a really good job. I wish we would have finished up a little bit better than what we did, but that's our new goal this year, is to exceed the expectations and get past the GAC championship and try to get a national championship.
Absolutely. So, you talked about that too last year. The finish. Obviously with the success, that can be a good thing too. But also, if you focus on it too much, I know that can also be, that could take your focus off the task at hand. How do you use last year as a fuel, but don't let it consume you to the point that you can't focus on the year that's already in front of you?
I think we can use it as fuel because of the way that the season ended. I think it ended in a type of way that, they're just unknown for Ouachita football. Understand Northwest Missouri State was a pretty good football team. They have a great resume, but so do we. So we want to get to that standard, and we want to become that team. And if that's what it takes to become that team, then we're going to have to get the job done. So we just kind of use that game as fuel, as we just can't let that happen again. It's not going to happen again. And what also is helping us this year to keep the momentum kind of going is we had a lot of returning starters on defense, and we had Riley, Connor Flanagan on the offensive side of the ball who returned. We lost a lot of great offensive linemen, but those guys were rallying those young offensive linemen, getting them going. Kendall Givens, getting those guys going over there, and we're feeling really good about this year.
Yeah, and you talked about kind of the goals for this team after last year, wanting to exceed the expectations. What are you looking to get out of the season personally and as a team?
So personally for me, I think I'm looking for a good playoff run this year, honestly, and I think we have the talent to do it. I've been here since 2019, and if you're asking me personally, I think this is probably the most talented team that we've had since I've been here. So I think that's my expectation for the team personally, is having a good playoff run, because even though we did lose that game to Northwest Missouri State the way we did, we see what it takes to get there. If that's the pinnacle, we know that, all right, this is what it has to take off that pinnacle, take the pinnacle off the top.
Well, those were some great words from quarterback Riley Harms and from safety Dante Gibson. So we're going to go ahead and finish up our segment here of the Tiger Prowl preview, starting with Ouachita women's tennis. They will travel to Plano, Texas for the Marty Berryman Invitational this Friday, September 8th through Sunday, September 10th at Collin College after their successful Rumble by the River opener last week. OBU men's tennis will open their season this weekend as they'll go to Tyler, Texas to take on the University of Texas at Tyler, as they're hosting an invitational in Tyler's. Third time I've said that. Friday, September 8th to Saturday, September 9th. And last year, when you look at that men's tennis team, that was a pretty successful squad. They were 12-11 last year, 2-1 in conference play, and they had a successful postseason. They ended up losing last year in the regionals to number 18 Washburn. When you look at what they did they did play UT Tyler last season. They were ranked number 19, Ouachita number 13 at the time. But Ouachita did lose 4-2. And when you look at that game, or sort of that match, at least without getting too technical, what are we hoping for Ouachita to open their season?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily so much about that match, but when you look at the end of the season for the men's tennis team last year, it was red hot, and it started off not so well. But I mean, you look here; they were 12-11, but they made a regional and ended up losing in the regional. So to only finish 12-11 and yet still make a regional and be competitive in your regional game, I think you're looking at the beginning of the season to start how you ended last season. Let some of that momentum carry on. And I have a feeling they're going to want really badly to get some revenge on UT Tyler.
Well, we'll go ahead and keep moving on. OBU men's and women's cross-country traveled to Magnolia, Arkansas this Friday to compete in the Lois Davis Invitational down there, hosted by Southern Arkansas University. Both squads had successful season openers over the weekend, and they do hope to repeat their results. OBU volleyball, they traveled to Denton, Texas for Texas Women's University Invitational. Texas Women's, they are 2-2 so far, so Ouachita is going to face them Thursday, September 7th at 7:30 p.m. They will then take on Illinois Springfield on Friday. And interesting thing about Illinois Springfield, though they are 1-2 on the year, they did beat GAC rival Arkansas Tech 3-0 last Saturday. So that's sort of something interesting to keep in mind. Then they'll play Augusta on Friday, who's so far 0-4 on the year. And then September 8th, they will be finishing. Actually, no, I'm getting my dates mixed up. Central Oklahoma, they will play them September 9th at 7:30 p.m. So far on the season, they are 4-0, and they did beat also another GAC opponent, Southwestern Oklahoma State, at the Midwestern State Invitational last Saturday. OBU men's and women's swim and dive preview their season this weekend at the Wagoner Pool for the Purple and White Meet. OBU's women's swim and dive was 6-5, 2-3 in conference play last year. They placed 4th out of 15 at the New South Intercollegiate Swim Conference Championships last season in Cleveland, Mississippi. OBU men's swim and dive shared the same record, and they placed 3rd out of 4 teams at the NSISC Championships. So both Tiger Shark squads had a combined 16 all-conference swimmers last year, and they're looking to replicate that success in their young program. So that is going to be it for the Tiger Prowl preview, and don't have any GAC overachiever segment this week. Hopefully by the time the NFL season starts, we might see some news, especially involving former Tiger Gregory Jr. on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Well, before we end this, do you guys have anything you would like to add before we go?
I guess just to add real quick on the Tiger Shark squads, or swim and dive, as you mentioned, we had 16 all-conference swimmers last year, and so this is a very young program, so I guess if you're the swim squad, you really hope that those older swimmers that may not be here any longer really left their mark and had a great mentorship last year, and so it should be a very smooth transition for these younger guys.
Yeah. I think most looking forward to next week to see how our cross-country squads, both guys and girls, are able to do in Magnolia. They really impressed this past weekend, so I think we're going to be able to get some good runners going this next meet.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and say what my game of the week will possibly be for, but it'll be for women's soccer. They will host this Thursday Union University. Why I say that is because it'll only be the second Ouachita Sports Digital Network broadcasted game of the year after they broadcasted Southwest Baptist and their win over Southwest Baptist last Sunday. But that should be the first game, assuming I don't have any other university obligations, the first game I will be able to be a part of the broadcast. So definitely check out that one and the broadcast for the football game this Saturday at 6 p.m. So I don't have anything else to say, but we appreciate you joining us for the second episode of the Roar Rundown Sports Podcast. We hope you have a good rest of your day, and go Tigers.